All right, let's dive into something pretty powerful today. We're taking a close look at Hosea 3.4.
Yeah, a really striking verse, definitely. And we've got some additional sources here that unpack what it means to lose your foundations, both that earthly stability and that sense of spiritual connection. And then there's even a reflection on how all of this might apply to, well, you listening right now.
Trying to bring it home. I like it. So let's actually hear what Hosea 3.4 says. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without ephod or teraphim. I mean, wow, that's quite a list. Doesn't really sound like they're missing just a few things here and there, does it?
No, no, not at all. It really paints this picture of a society that's been stripped bare and in multiple ways.
Totally.
To grasp the real weight of that verse, we got to kind of step back and think about like how life was structured way back then.
Okay, take us there.
So you've got these two major forces influencing people's lives. You had the political leaders, those kings and princes, and then their religious practices, how they connected with the divine.
Right, like those two big pillars.
Exactly. And they weren't separate spheres either. Like these were deeply intertwined.
Hmm. So when we think about those kings and princes, it wasn't just about someone sitting on a fancy throne. I mean, they set the rules.
Oh, absolutely.
They're managing the economy.
Uh-huh.
They basically shape the whole social order.
Oh,
I mean, a good ruler, that probably meant you had some peace, some prosperity, but a bad one
oh, yeah.
could bring a whole lot of hardship, tons of instability. It really wasn't just about who had the power, but the impact that power had on, like, everyday people.
Exactly, yeah. It's like the basic frameworks that provide order and security in any society.
Yeah.
Think about it. In the ancient world, that ruler was central to all of that. And then you've got the religious side. For them back then, faith wasn't just a set of beliefs like you check off a list.
Right.
It was woven into how they understood the world, their place in it.
Yeah.
I mean, they looked to their gods for protection, for guidance when they had to make tough choices, and for a sense of, well, overall well-being. The temple, all the rituals, those were vital. Those were like their spiritual and moral health food.
It's like the air they breathe.
Totally.
So going back to Hosea 3.4, when it says, without king or prince, it's going way beyond just a change in leadership. It's more like a breakdown of that political security, that national stability.
Yeah.
Imagine a society always on edge, always threatened, with no reliable system of justice, no real governance. What do you think that kind of impact would have, just like on daily life?
Well, I think it'd create this feeling that you're just vulnerable all the time. Without any real authority, things could just descend into chaos, law and order just break down, people are exposed, they're left without any recourse if something bad happens.
There's no safety net.
Right, exactly. It's that missing framework that usually gives you that feeling of safety, that things are predictable.
It's like that rug's been pulled out from under you.
Yeah, completely.
Okay, then there's that second part. It says, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without ephod or teraphim. So this is like the spiritual life just completely disrupted. Can you break down what those different elements actually meant?
Sure, yeah. So sacrifice, that was a core practice. It often involved offerings to connect with God, ask for forgiveness, express gratitude, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Sacred pillars were a bit more, well, they could represent a lot of different things. Sometimes they were tied to covenants or served as these symbolic markers in sacred spaces, setting that place apart.
Right.
The ephod was a specific garment worn by the priests that signified their role as like mediators between God and the people.
Okay.
And then you've got teraphim. These were smaller, often kept in homes, household idols, and people might have turned to them for guidance or protection on a more, I guess you could say, personal level.
More intimate. So to have all of that just gone, poof. It's like their entire spiritual system just collapsed, No real established way to worship together. No one recognized as like a go-between with the divine. And even those personal, those more immediate connections to the spiritual realm are gone. What kind of internal, I don't know, what would that do to someone? What kind of feeling would that create, do you think?
Well, it seems to me it would lead to this really profound sense of, well, disconnection and emptiness. Not only are they facing all this external instability we talked about, but they've lost their anchors internally. All those spiritual practices that had given them meaning, comfort, this sense of being connected to something bigger than themselves. And this is where I think we can start to bridge this ancient idea to today. We can consider what it means for you, for anyone listening, to experience a similar kind of loss, but on both these earthly and spiritual levels.
Yeah, and I think that's the really important part, right? When we think of a kingdom today, it's probably not a literal monarchy. But it's that feeling of stability, right? In our lives, in our communities, maybe even in the bigger picture of society. What happens when that sense of order, that feeling that things are fair, that there's justice, what happens when that starts to feel absent?
Well, the source material suggests that even if it's not, a full-blown societal collapse, that a life where that broader sense of reliable order feels absent, it can really lead to a sense of chaos. It could be feeling like the rules don't apply to everyone equally, that no one cares if you're wronged. It could just be this general feeling of insecurity about the future, that your own circumstances aren't stable.
Yeah, like the ground's not solid anymore.
Exactly.
And then, what about that heavenly kingdom idea, but applied to today? It's that spiritual connection, our sense of purpose, the relationship with God. If you have faith, what's it like to feel adrift there?
Well, the source speaks of despair, of this restlessness. When that connection to something that's, well, transcendent, when that feels broken or absent, it can create this deep unease, this feeling that something's missing. Even if everything else in your life, all the outward stuff,
Yeah.
seems okay. It can lead to this constant search for meaning, for fulfillment, but you never quite get there.
You can't put your finger on it.
Right, exactly.
And all of this is really highlighting something the reflection touches on, this idea that we're created with these two needs. So we need stability and order in our earthly lives, but we also need this connection to something bigger, that spiritual foundation. It's almost like we're designed to exist in this interplay between the two.
I think that's right on, yeah.
Yeah.
The source describes the heavenly kingdom as this realm of righteousness, peace, and joy, a place of communion with God. And it suggests that, we truly flourish not by neglecting one or the other, but by finding a harmony between those earthly experiences and that spiritual grounding.
So it's not one or the other, it's both.
Yeah.
And the reflection we have really addresses this head on. It says, and I'm quoting here,
Oh.
"Oh, Christian, if you find yourself in a situation where you feel disconnected from both earthly stability and spiritual fulfillment, turn to God." That's, that's pretty direct, pretty powerful.
No, it is. It really is. The material is making the point that this feeling of being unmoored, of being lost in both of these areas, that's not where we're supposed to stay. It points to God as the source of both, the provision and stability we need in our everyday lives, and that deep spiritual fulfillment that comes from knowing Him. It's not like you have to choose one or the other.
It's both and.
Yeah, exactly.
So in God, we can find this different kind of security than what the world can offer on its own, and a much deeper sense of purpose, of peace, than maybe we find through just chasing material things. It's really cool how the reflection emphasizes that God is presented as the ultimate king, the one constant in a world that feels like it's constantly shifting.
And, there's a pretty clear lesson for us to take from Hosea's warning. The material is encouraging us to be very mindful, to not drift so far that we lose our connection on both of these fronts. It's a call to really seek God actively, to trust that He's in control even when things feel uncertain around us, and to find our rest and security in His love.
It seems like the heart of it is this idea that we really need both to feel grounded here and now, and for that deep, lasting fulfillment. It comes from connecting with God.
I think that nails it, yeah. It's a reminder of where those deepest needs we have are truly met and where our allegiance ultimately should lie.
So I guess as we wrap up this deep dive into Hosea 3.4, the big takeaway here is the impact, the huge impact of losing both our sense of stability, that earthly stability, and our spiritual connection. That ancient prophecy, it paints a really vivid picture of what happens when those foundational parts of life are they're gone.
Yeah. And the reflection we looked at, it's bringing that ancient warning right into today, right into your life as you're listening to this. It's urging us all to think about where we find our security, where we find our sense of purpose, and to turn to God if we feel like something's missing in either one of those areas.
Like really honestly ask ourselves, where are we putting our trust?
Yes.
Where are we looking for that true and lasting fulfillment?
Yeah, 100%.
So it leaves you with a question. It's a big one, maybe a tough one, but an important one to wrestle with. In your life right now, where do you feel most secure? And where do you feel that deepest spiritual connection? If there are areas where you feel this sense of loss, this disconnect in either of those kingdoms, what might Hosea's prophecy be saying to you? It's an invitation, and I think a really powerful one, to think about where we place our trust, where we search for that true, that lasting fulfillment, that joy.
You said it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.